Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a mystery you've probably experienced firsthand. Have you ever wondered why some classrooms are strictly organized into perfectly straight rows for quiet lectures, while others are these chaotic, dynamic, project-based hubs? Well, the answer doesn't actually start with your local school board. It starts way back with ancient minds. Today, we're diving into the foundational philosophies that literally built the walls of our educational systems. Here's our roadmap for the journey. We'll start with the roots and branches of philosophy, jump into major classic and modern movements in the West, and then round things out by exploring the incredibly rich educational traditions of the East. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the roots of philosophy. To understand how we learn, we really have to get a grip on what philosophy actually is. So, translating directly from ancient Greek, philo means love, and sophos means wisdom. It is quite literally the love for wisdom. Think of it as the mother of all sciences, and our ultimate comprehensive blueprint for human nature and reality. In education, philosophy is basically the compass we use. It helps us approach learning critically and figure out exactly how we're supposed to interact with the world around us. Moving right along to Section 2, 3 branches of philosophy. These are the core building blocks of pretty much any educational worldview you can think of. These 3 pillars force us to ask the really big foundational questions. First up, epistemology. This asks, how do we actually know things? It digs into the relationship between belief, reason, and hard evidence. Next is metaphysics, which asks, what actually exists? It's the deep study of reality and the absolute essence of things. And finally, we have axiology, which explores our values. What is fundamentally right, wrong, or even beautiful? Believe it or not, every single curriculum you have ever studied is built directly on top of these 3 pillars. Okay, so you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but how does metaphysics actually dictate a Tuesday morning math class? It is absolutely fascinating to see how theory translates to practice. So let's step through the doors of some very distinct learning environments to see this in action. That brings us to Section 3, major classroom philosophies. Let's take a look at our first set of classic classrooms. Picture the stark contrast between 2 absolute heavyweights of history. Imagine an idealist classroom, the kind championed by Plato. Here, the focus is entirely on the mind, deep Socratic discussions and enduring knowledge. Reality to them is made up of ideas. But if you walk right down the hall into a realist classroom rooted in Aristotle's thinking, the vibe completely changes. To a realist, the world is made of substantial material entities. Knowledge comes directly from sensory experience and demonstrating the hard, natural laws of the world. These philosophies completely dictate how a room operates. An idealist teacher acts as a moral model. They're a questioner, constantly pushing runners toward perfection and building their character. The realist teacher, on the other hand, operates as a guide and a demonstrator. Their classroom is a highly ordered, incredibly disciplined space where students rely on their senses to absorb concrete facts. It's totally different. Now, picture something dynamic. This is the classroom of pragmatism, championed by thinkers like John Dewey. Pragmatists believe education shouldn't just be a bunch of abstract ideas. It should be about life and growth. We're talking practical learning, focused on real-world, utilitarian skills paired with experiential learning. Students are interacting directly with their environment. The teacher here isn't just lecturing. They're arranging experiences, tapping into the students' natural motivation through messy, hands-on projects. Fast forward a bit with me to Section 4, modern educational movements, where educators started seriously pushing the boundaries of traditional schooling. As education modernized, distinct camps started forming. On one side, you have perennialism, which immerses students in timeless, intellectual ideas that have endured through history. The teacher delivers these eternal truths to a mostly passive room. Then you have essentialism, which is the ultimate back-to-basics approach. This one focuses rigidly on the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. In this classroom, progress is heavily, and I mean heavily, driven by achievement test scores. But step into a progressivist classroom, influenced by folks like John Dewey and Johann Pestalozzi, and you'll find a space entirely centered around the child. Their core belief? Education is always a process of development. Progressivism is all about cultivating individuality, acknowledging that kids have multiple intelligences, and ensuring they learn by actually doing. The teacher's main job here is to plan lessons that spark deep, genuine curiosity. These modern shifts eventually took education into 2 profound, almost opposite directions.
Existentialism focuses radically inward. Influenced by thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, the learner determines their own rules, and the teacher is just there to assist in the student's subjective, highly personal journey toward finding a meaningful existence. Social reconstructionism, conversely, focuses radically outward. The classroom is aimed at societal reform. Students are actively taking on real-world problems, like inequality or environmental issues, and the teacher uses community-based learning to literally bring the real world into the classroom. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, Eastern Educational Traditions. Let's travel across the globe to explore some deeply holistic approaches that bring entirely different moral and spiritual dimensions to how we learn. In these traditions, education and spirituality are deeply intertwined. You really can't separate them. In the Hindu educational tradition, advocated by figures like Mahatma Gandhi, the teacher takes responsibility for the student's spiritual welfare. They impart knowledge by strict moral example and through memory-intensive oral debates. Buddhism, rooted in the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, takes a slightly different approach, framing education around faith, where students engage in continuous discussions so they can deeply learn from one another. The absolute crux of Buddhism is that education is tied to a specific worldview, built on the Four Noble Truths. It starts with the idea that life inherently involves suffering. Then, it explains that this suffering comes from our attachments, but crucially, it teaches that it is possible to end this suffering and outlines the path to do so. So an educational system under this philosophy isn't just about getting a job. It's ultimately aimed at achieving enlightenment and ending human suffering. That is a massive paradigm shift. Meanwhile, stepping into a Confucian environment reveals a totally different focus. Founded by Confucius, this philosophy demands a strict devotion to family, deep loyalty to elders, and a strong sense of civic duty. Education here often revolves around rigorous civil service exams and the lifelong, intense cultivation of specific cardinal virtues: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and sincerity. We can also look at the beautiful physical philosophies of Taoism and Zen Buddhism. Taoism, established by Lao Tzu, is all about simplicity and Wu Wei, which basically translates to letting things come naturally. It's about going with the flow and achieving harmony with nature, often using slow, controlled movements. Zen Buddhism, on the flip side, utilizes intense, mind-awakening meditation. The ultimate goal is to open the mind's eye, to realize that the entire universe exists within oneself, constantly seeking the invisible truths of reality. We round out our global tour with Islamic philosophy. Rooted in the teachings of Muhammad and the 5 pillars of faith, this tradition beautifully mandates that education must provide useful knowledge. But here's the kicker: it's not just for individual gain or getting ahead in life. It is explicitly for the ultimate benefit of all humanity. Furthermore, it posits that a truly Islamic government has an active duty to promote and provide adequate education to all of its citizens. As you can see, the best educators don't just pick one of these concepts off a menu. They draw from a brilliant synthesis of these profound traditions. From the fierce logical debates of Plato to the hands-on, real-world action of social reconstructionism, all the way to the deep moral guidance of Eastern traditions. It really leaves us with one incredibly inspiring question to ponder. Armed with all these blueprints of human thought, which of these classrooms will you build?